Hi everyone, I'm Libby from ProWritingAid and welcome to tonight's write-in all about subplots and writing subplots. So, subplots, what are they? A subplot is a narrative thread through your story that supports or adds to the main plot. Subplots have their own story arc, so depending on the content and structure of your subplot, it can either deepen the conflict in the main plot or add depth to a secondary character's storyline. So there's lots of opportunity to kind of take all of those ideas that are swimming around in your brain and still make them work in your main story by giving them their own little subplot that branches off. So why do you want to add subplots to your story? Reason one, adding subplots to your story creates a narrative arc with multiple levels, so lots of interest for your reader. Stories that only have one main plot may feel flat or boring. It may feel like everything's happening on one level. Subplots add complexity and depth, making your story more engaging. So yeah, if there's more going on for your reader to sort of remember to piece together, to work out how it all relates to the main story, they're going to be more engaged with what you're writing, and they're going to want to know more about how that subplot links to your key central idea too. So reason number two, subplots can increase the tension and conflict in your story. A successful subplot adds new plot points and creates more obstacles for your main character, resulting in a more dramatic climax. If they've just kind of gone from A to B to C and you've got them through your main plot, then there will be lots for your reader there. They'll be able to follow them as they go through their journey. But if you add subplots, if you add kind of curveballs that they have to deal with, or other characters that they have to come across and interact with to reveal new elements of their own character, it's going to just really bring your reader closer to your main character and to your main plot as well. And reason number three, subplots can reveal new information about the characters in your story. Each subplot will make your characters more vulnerable and three-dimensional, as they add nuance to how your characters interact and shed light on their personality traits. So yeah, again, anything that your character can come up against is going to reveal something new about them. Obviously, when it comes to writing subplots, you don't want to be throwing things in there that are completely irrelevant to your main plot. You don't want to just throw something in for the sake of revealing a certain thing about your character. It has to all sort of link together, and we're going to go into sort of how to do that today with our writing exercises. But yeah, having those in there can really give you opportunities to explore dimensions of your character that really do fit within your story, but that maybe wouldn't have come out if you just followed those main plot points in your key central plot. So we've got a couple of examples of subplots here. So Romeo and Juliet. While the conflict between the Capulets and the Montagues creates the main conflict between Romeo and Juliet, subplots like the murder of Mercutio add depth to the tension and raise the stakes. And I'm going to embarrass myself by saying that in the Baz Luhrmann film version of Romeo and Juliet, that the bit where Mercutio dies, probably one of the most memorable bits of the film for me. And I know it's not just from the film. I'm aware that Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet, but I think that having a well-executed subplot can really just add so much depth to your story. And also in Harry Potter. So while the main plot in Harry Potter is about Harry's fight against Voldemort, there are multiple subplots throughout the series, like Harry's relationship with his aunt and uncle and the trauma from that, and his friendship with the Weasley family and their subsequent subplots that come from all of those characters and from Harry's sort of feeling of finding another family in the Weasleys as well. So there are a few different types of subplots that you might write. So there's a mirror subplot, which is a smaller scale conflict that mirrors the main characters' sort of key conflict in your story in order to teach them a valuable lesson. So again, something that might not come up with your central conflict, but in that little smaller scale microcosm, I guess, that you've created in your subplot, they'll find something in themselves and your readers will find something in them there too. There are contrasting subplots. So in a contrasting subplot, a secondary character faces similar challenges to the main character, but makes different choices. I kind of think of that as kind of like a choose your own adventure in a way. What would happen if at one of those branches in the adventure, one of those key decision moments, your character made a different choice? You can use another character to explore that and to kind of really emphasize why your character made the choice that they did and why that had the effect that it did have on your story. There are complicating subplots. So in a complicating subplot, a secondary character makes things more challenging for the main character. So that's throwing someone in there that just really derails what your character would have done if they hadn't have been there. And if a character goes along unopposed in a story, that can really kind of just mean that your story is plodding along and there's no conflict there. Exactly. Who said that? Andrea. They're a wrench thrown in the cogs. That is exactly what they are. They're a wrench personified in the cogs of your story, in the cogs of your characterization. And then there's a romantic subplot. So in a romantic subplot, the main character has a love interest and their relationship adds tension to the main plot. I mean, I don't know if it's a bit cliche to refer to it even now, but in the Hunger Games, a lot of people talk about the sort of love triangle, and while it divides opinion and people kind of either love it, hate it, love to hate it, it makes people talk and it kind of makes people have opinions about what you're writing about, how those characters interact with each other, about who, I mean, on a basic level, who's with who, like who you want to end up together, who does, etc. And yeah, loads of conflict that can arise from that, and conflict quite often equals interest, so that's always good to introduce. So I think we will get started with sprint number 1. So your prompt is, one way to add a subplot is to have characters who pop in and out of your story while then going off on their own adventure. For our first sprint, brainstorm about a character that can enter your story early on to have a conversation with the main character. Write out what that conversation will be, and then also plan an exit for that secondary character. Why will they leave? What will they be doing while leaving? So what is prompting them to come into your character's life? What is prompting them to then exit your character's life? Because entrances and exits can be some of the most sort of revealing things about a character. So we've only got 5 minutes for this sprint. I realise that kind of does sound like quite a lot, but if you just sort of brainstorm, get some ideas down, maybe sort of start coming up, if you like writing dialogue, you could start just coming up with an exchange to try and explore a little more about your character. But yeah, I think we will start writing. So Michelle, are you able to start the timer there? Perfect. So we'll pop off our cameras for a little bit. Everybody get writing, and we will be back in about 5 minutes. Any questions, pop them in the chat. We'll be there to answer those for you. So yeah, get going. 1 minute left. I can see Sandra's already posted her response to the prompt in the chat. So if you've got your response, pop it in the chat, and we will start taking a look, and we will start sharing them. And if you don't want to share your actual response to the prompt, you can share your word count, your favorite sentence from what you wrote, what you found challenging, or what you found sort of maybe easy, what came to you sort of quickly when you saw that. And I see somebody has just joined us. When you we're all sort of writing in relation to prompts that pop up on the screen, and you can pop those in the Zoom chat when we get on to our next one. Okay, we have already got some great responses coming in. So I'm gonna go with email address names here. But D. Shellquist says the main character's father shows up, who he thought long dead, which is already gonna open up so much great stuff to work with. So he shares minimal information about where he has been, only enough to get the main character to pursue him as he disappears back to his shadowy world of secrets. Father leaves to protect his son, leaving the main character, son's the main character, to search for him and for answers while his father remains elusive. So, I mean, there's going to be so much that comes out of that relationship in terms of the emotional and the sort of character development of that main character. And I mean, it's, for me, like, I feel a lot of empathy as a reader. I kind of wonder whether the reader knows that the father's left to sort of save his son, or whether it's kind of a case of the reader only finds out when the son finds out. But yeah, that sounds brilliant. Michelle, have you got one?
So James Deborah shared a subplot of his story, which is called Ascendant Horizon, which sounds very intense and interesting. And it says, the secondary character, Vincent, a close friend of Ezekiel and fellow member of a house of adepts, Vincent will arrive in the story a little after Ezekiel returns from an adept battle, with news of a connection between Kenyatta and the attempted assassination of the king. Vincent will comfort Ezekiel over this news, saying that it's possible but not yet written in stone. Vincent will then be ordered to leave by a captain to deal with a strange case. Vincent leaves. And that's a brief overview of the subplot. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it really does. Just it's amazing how much of a sort of a bomb a character can drop on a story before just leaving again, which actually I have one here that's pretty much like that. So David Woodruff has shared part of his, and it's kind of a bit that's written out, a little bit of dialogue. So Sigmund made another appearance. For a pseudo-dragon, he could be quite annoying. Oh look, he announced, you're fighting another demon imp. How exciting. The demon the demon took advantage of my distraction and sent a hard-fingered claw slashing at my head. You know, you could help out here, I protested to Sigmund. Oh, heavens no. He flapped his wings excitedly and sniffed the smoky air. If I did that, I'd be interfering with your heroic story. Then he teleported out again, leaving me alone with the red-skinned imp. Then he popped right back in again. But do continue. And once again, he was gone. So one of those kind of figures that you want to give you some advice. They've got an awful lot of knowledge that could help you out, but they just don't. I don't know, this is going to be very specific. There's a TV series in the UK called Merlin, and there was a dragon in that, voiced by John Hurt. Fantastic series. It was exactly like that. Who would sort of come in, be like, yeah, I have that knowledge, I can help you, and then just kind of, oof, I'm gone, but I'm not going to help you. So it kind of shows your character the knowledge that they need to get where they need to get, but they're not going to give you the easy way out there. I think we might have time for one more.
I have one from turquoisesupreme@gmail.com. It says Carlton gets lost in the woods and meets Evelyn, who helps guide Carlton back to town. Evelyn gets lost in the crowd in town. Evelyn catches up to Carlton by a ruined town, and when she heard it was haunted, she left Carlton again. So ruined town and haunted town, that immediately catches my interest.
And the fact that I'm thinking that Colton kind of has to stay, and then Evelyn's kind of gone, deal with that. Haunted town, not my vibe, not feeling it. I'm out, I'm off. Right, I think we'll move on to our next prompt. So let's keep on going. So we've had that, sorry. Right, so for sprint number 2, a bridge character is a character that bridges 2 contrasting worlds within your story. Bridge characters can be great for creating subplots. For instance, say your main character is a thief who works with the mob. A bridge character might be their lawyer, someone they interact with that's as different as possible from your main character's everyday life. For our second sprint, invent a character who is as different from your main character as possible. Or think up a parallel world to your character's world and invent a character who would bridge that gap. Brainstorm how and why this bridge might appear. So you're kind of looking to find something completely different to maybe what you're working on already that can help you shed new light on your story. So that when it says 2 contrasting worlds, that can either be literal worlds if you have a fantasy novel going on or a sci-fi novel, or it can be those sort of different social worlds that will just have different themes weaving through them, that will open up some interesting stuff with your characters. So again, any questions, pop them in chat and we will get back to you, and we will start the timer, get writing, and post your responses in the chat when you've got them. Got 7 minutes for this one, so let's go. Just under a minute left. You can start sharing your responses in the chat as well when you're ready. Brilliant. Sorry, I got distracted by somebody writing a story from my perspective. That's so great. So we've already had lots of responses coming in. You can also, again, if you don't feel like sharing what you've written in the chat, you can tell us your word count, your favorite sentence, what was challenging about the prompt, and also what was easy about the prompt, what came to you really easy. Okay, so let's have a look. There's so many good ones here.
I can share one first.
Yes, that'd be great.
I picked one out that I love already. So this is from Turquoise Supreme, and it says, Delphina is a Southern gospel pastor's daughter cut off from our world and lives in another world. Stelma is an elderly centaur with a talent for healing salves, tonics, and incantations. Their worlds collide when Stelma uses an incantation on Delphina's friend to help them speak other languages. Delphina is forced to accept their actions. Later, fortunately, Delphina and Stelma bond over cooking.
Ah, nice.
I love that. It takes me back to the Charlaine Harris True Blood series. It has a lot of elements of that, and I really like that.
I love going into everybody's stories. It's so great to, you can just see all of the worlds that are behind these short little snippets that we get. I love it. Okay, so I've got one from James. So bridge character Kellia. I'm going to go for Kellia Saphira as the pronunciation there. Kellia Saphira is a member of the House of the Lion, the same adept house that both Ezekiel and Vincent are part of. She is a woman of great empathy who cares about those affected by the conflicts of the adept houses. She also has no real desire to engage in constant conflict, something that is not shared by Ezekiel, who prefers to fight. Kellia appears when Ezekiel is summoned to the Lion Council's chambers for a briefing of his recent skirmish. So you're getting somebody that is really, that wants to fight, that kind of defines a lot of their personality, coming up against somebody who is not driven by conflict and that is going to have to try and find a common language there to try and sort of move through, which I think reading dialogue when two people are kind of operating completely different spheres is really interesting as they sort of try and find the same sort of way to communicate in a way. Yeah, it's great.
I have one here from dshellquist@gmail.com. It says, MC is a boy who hates seeing injustice and wrongdoing, but understands the societal expectations and refrains from getting involved. Bridge character is a noble princess who sees any action for the greater good as acceptable. Her status allows her to get away with almost anything. Conflict arises when her actions directly affect MC, who can no longer stand idly by and confronts the entire royal family. That sounds incredibly interesting. I love that.
I have one about dragons, which I really enjoyed reading from Hayley. So Hayley's two characters are dragons named Night and Dark. Night is bad at flying, is weak, works on the back lines, and never does anything serious, so she's not respected. Dark is a great flyer and fighter who works on the front lines of the war and is always serious, so he is respected. They interact when the other character, Shadow, teams up with them both on a mission, but they never get along normally. They also have opposing jobs. So Dark is a soldier and Night is a healer. So, I mean, I love that you've just got Dark, Night, Shadow, like clear bridge connection there, but also trying to find somebody that will take again, two characters that are from completely different spheres, that have completely different worldviews, and then linking them together through a character that makes them interact and finds and helps sort of facilitate those paths to communication is a really it's one of the sort of best things about bridge characters, really.
All right, do we have time for one more?
Yeah, I think so. I have time for a couple more.
Okay, this one from Sue Hayes says, main character is an FBI agent searching for a killer. Agent's car is in the auto repair shop and the mechanic delivers the car to him, then has to drive mechanic back to the shop. The agent was raised by a wealthy family in the North and is highly educated. He struggles to make conversation with the mechanic who comes from a poor Southern family. The mechanic has information regarding the killer. So that's so interesting to see, you know, the class differences conflicting there, and, you know, having the characters need to work together to find out the kind of the whodunit. I love that.
Yeah, and you instantly you want them to get along, or you want them to be able to communicate, because if they can't, then you don't know what's going to happen in the story. So you instantly have you have stakes in it as a reader. I think I will read one more because I really like this one. So the era is post World War I, so 1920s. The main character is a detective inspector, and the bridge character is a journalist. So it's an acquaintance, not really a friend. Their common background between those two characters are they're both World War I veterans. They both sort of come across each other, meet up regularly at court sessions and share information, but they're careful with what they're sharing, since the detective inspector might use intel, and by doing so is sort of acting against a journalist informant. So that journalist network of informants, the whole thing that their career is built on, would then fall apart if they share the wrong information with the main character, the detective inspector. So yeah, that would destroy his source of information. The detective inspector can only sort of grant so much information on running investigations without compromising them. So the detective inspector is limited by law. He can't enter certain social circles. Many people would not willingly talk to him because he's from the police, and he can't force them to unless he sort of bends the law, and that would maybe, I don't know, but might require some sort of out of character action, or kind of take you off in a different direction that you don't necessarily want to go in. Journalists enter social circles that the detective inspector can't enter, but only due to information granted by the detective inspector. It's only due to that information that he knows where to dig and knows who to go talk to, the questions to ask. But people are more willing to talk to him because he grants financial compensation, and criminals might want to leak certain information on their enemies. So they come from different realms, they have different motivations, they have different sort of parameters for what they can and can't do. And I just think that having those two characters also lets you write about those different institutions and the limits of them, and what that kind of that ends up the impact that has on your characters as well, and on your story. So yeah, I love that era as well. I'd be interested in that one. I'd like to read that one. I'd like to read so many of them, really. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you so much for submitting those for that prompt. We have got one more, and there is a little bit longer on this one, so hopefully you'll be able to get even deeper into your characters, into your story. So sprint number 3, the prompt is: subplots don't always have to be delicately woven throughout your story. Sometimes a subplot might just be an isolated chunk. So think a chapter of your story is like when you're reading and suddenly it switches point of view, switches to something that you're not quite familiar with. It can be, it can actually draw you in further because you want to know how it relates to the rest of it. So it could be an isolated chunk of your story where your main character goes off and does something totally aside from the main plot. This is seen in Huckleberry Finn, where Huck engages with the Grangerfords and the Shepherdsons before going off on his own. For our final sprint, forget about elegant transitions, brainstorm about a new section or chapter that will serve as a story within a story separate from your main conflict. So even if it feels completely kind of random in terms of the context of the rest of your story, give it a go, see what comes out of it, and see sort of what your character can go and do when you kind of release them from the web of your plot that you've got going on already. So I think we'll start the timer, get writing, and as always, share those responses in the chat when you have them. Brilliant. just over halfway through your time, so 4 minutes left. Just under a minute left. And that is time up on that sprint. So if you haven't already, send your responses to that prompt into the chat box, and you can also share your favorite part from what you wrote, what you found challenging, and what you found easy about that prompt. And just before we jump into reading some of those, there's already some great ones in there. Mary asked a question in the Q&A box. In the isolated chunk, does the main character have to take something away from the experience? Is it an opportunity for the reader to get more insight into the character's thinking? So I think the main thing you want to happen is for the reader to take something away from that that experience or that sort of chunk of your story. And I guess that's kind of always what you're thinking of, like, what is my reader getting from this word choice, this paragraph, this scene, this chapter? What do I want the reader to think? What do I want them to be focusing on? And how does what I'm writing right now serve that? So I think most things that your character goes through, they'll take something away from, even if it's a sense that they were apathetic to it, or kind of the fact that it didn't have an effect has an effect, sort of thing. But yeah, the main thing is for your reader to be able to take something from it. So even if a lot of books are kind of where you read that chapter that maybe doesn't quite fit, but it does fit into your experience of the book. So working out where it fits without fitting, if that makes any sense, is useful when you're sort of thinking about these kinds of chapters. And quick question that's just come in: can the chunk be longer than a single chapter? Yeah, I think so. I think it could go over a couple of chapters. You might have a couple of short chapters. You might have a slightly longer section. I think as long as that little chunk of sort of something different doesn't distract too far from your central plot, I think that should be fine. I'm talking like I'm a complete expert, like I've been writing for years, but well, no, debatable. But so pinch of salt. But yeah, I think from reading all of our sort of brilliant writers' blog posts that come in and sort of talking to Hayley about this before the webinar, I think that having that focus on your main plot, and then making sure your subplots serve that, even if it's inadvertently, that's the main sort of most important thing there. Okay, so let's get on to reading some of these responses. Michelle, have you got one that you've picked out?
I do. Great. So this is from Sayer Ambrosio, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Sayer, but it says, male targeted by killer, who's the main character, turns into his protege instead of his victim. He approaches his captor about, in essence, being his apprentice. He learns the ins and outs of the killing game from the main character, and they become inseparable. Eventually, the protege, who is a young adult about 21, starts seeing a handsome male from his school that looks familiar to the main character. After much prodding and digging, the main character realizes that the boyfriend of his apprentice is the son of the detective that interviewed him about the disappearances. Upon finding this out, his new goal is not to kill the boyfriend, but bring him into their twisted family just to toy with the detective and watch his life crumble. And they added the little note, did I mention I write very dark thriller and horror? And we're here for that. We love that. And that's exactly the kind of subplot that makes thriller great and keeps your readers, wanting to keep turning those pages and never put the book down. So I think that's awesome.
I saw that one as well, and I was just kind of like, ooh. Like, immediately just like, he was meant to die and now he's killing people. I mean, yeah. I've got one from Amanda. So she's written this bit out as prose, so I'll read it out. It was evening by the time the council had finished grilling them. Zero twisted and stretched, trying to relieve the knots in her back. How do your people sit on mats for hours on end like that? We're used to it, I suppose. Adokal rolled his shoulders. Well, the councillors are used to it. I'm usually off doing something instead of talking to death. She watched him in the flickering torchlight, unsure of what to say. The wind shifted and a sweet scent floated on the breeze, sparking her memory. You offered to show me the gardens earlier. Are you still, would you, please? A small smile lit his face. It would be my pleasure. I can't say you're the first Padishi to see them now. Introduction. Penmore, never the thief, she laughed. But you can be the first outsider I've been to the gardens with. It was hard to tell in the dark, but she swore he was blushing, and I butchered that, sorry. But there's like a little romance subplot, I think, going on there, and I think the little details are really sweet, and I think that kind of, I don't know what's going on in the rest of the story, but even the idea of there being that garden, like almost like a little enclosed space within the story where that romance, that relationship can start to blossom, is really nice. I like that.
I have one here from Sue, and it says, the main character is an amateur sleuth looking for a teenager who disappeared from a beach party. Sleuth spends her days trying to solve the mystery, but in the evening she takes swimming lessons because she has a great fear of the water, and she knows that her search is going to take her out into the water on a boat. And I think that's a really interesting subplot because you're seeing the growth of that main character and how, you know, throughout the story they're growing and changing to get to the end result, which I like.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of, I like that you also get that she's taken it into her own hands as well. Like, she knows something's going to happen, so she's going to get those swimming lessons, and that tells you something about the character too, so it's great. Got one from, it's starlarajav@gmail.com. So the main character must retrieve something for a rock troll in exchange for information that will help save her village. It seems like a side quest that is wasting time, but will actually help her gain a power that will allow her to defeat the main villain in the end. And that's kind of like what I was saying earlier about having that little section where you seem to go off into something that maybe doesn't quite relate to the story as the reader knows it already, going off into that and placing something there that will then have more relevance later. But then you can also kind of use that, if you might also use that sort of side quest to just sort of reveal something about the character, to kind of set them up for the main quest. So you can kind of go one of two ways. You can either have it really sort of clearly link to the main plot of your story, or it can be more of a kind of character development device, and something that kind of you want it to still link to the main plot, so that your readers don't kind of go, well, why have they put that in there? But yeah, having that little sort of aside that tells you more about a character can be really interesting as you sort of move through your story. I think we've got time for a couple more.
Okay, I have one here from Sandra. It says, Thomas ends up in the stranger's flat as he runs away from the police. Surprised that the men are willing to help him, he asks for the reasoning. This leads to a long conversation about stranger's past life and how the story and the story about how the world went bad with the level of crime raising up. How the world needs hope and heroes, or what police call vigilantes, to survive. When hiding in the wardrobe as police enter the flat, Thomas thinks about how the other world needs so much to happen to fulfill the prophecy, where this world needs nothing more than hope. And I love that because that's also kind of showing the journey of the main character, and they're grappling with, you know, internal struggles, struggles with other characters, and that really gives you a lot of insight to, you know, how they're thinking, and kind of gives the reader an idea of where the story might be headed next.
Mm-hmm. I've just seen one that I really like. There's some details in here that I think are great. So Rona Barton from at gmail.com has written, although the main story follows the building of a grand library in 1973 that's suffering cost overruns, which is too real for anyone that's ever worked in a library, and follows the architect and city planner who became an item during the process, another character, once married to the city planner, has fallen on rough times. We've only heard about him, the man who was waiting at home during the planner's late work sessions in the office, the one who stopped having anything to say to her when they were together, the one who wouldn't even engage in a conversation about where they stood. But he appears near the end of the story after she leaves him. He's had quite the streak of bad luck. His popsicle stick constructed scale model of Prague, the city's beauty being the only real thing he and his wife had in common, got termites. And while trying to find the street location of a job interview, he passes the library under construction. A steel worker drops a nail gun off the roof and it lands on the man's foot. He doesn't shout, he doesn't look up, he limps away and actually is cut off. But I mean, having that character that is linked to the main plot that you're working on, but then has their own kind of story that it's a direct result of the main plot, but gives you more emotional depth. You're kind of seeing the effect that the main character's life is having on somebody else's life, and that kind of helps you sort of see what's happening on in the wider world of the story. And I also just love the different details in there. I love the termites. That really got me. Well, we are 1 minute out from the end of this webinar. I can't believe how quickly that has flown, but thank you all so much for coming, as always, for sharing your stories, sharing your worlds with us. There are so many different stories in there that I would love to read. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you will join us at some of our other webinars that we've got going on that I mentioned earlier. So we've got that plotter run through, we've got our other monthly series, and we will also be delighted to, and Hayley will be back next month to see you at the write-in on converting your fan fiction. That's it, converting your fan fiction. I've seen like lots of you have been writing that you write fan fiction, so I think that'll be a really great session for a lot of you, and it'd be great to see you there. But yeah, thank you for coming, everyone, and we will see you at another event soon. Okay,
bye everybody.
Bye.